Welcome, everyone. By way of introduction, I'm Nate Hausman, Inclusive Prosperity Capitals, or IPC's Solar for All Program Director. Thanks for joining today. This webinar is a deep dive on IPC's Solar for All Construction to Permanent Loan product. And as you may know from previous webinars, IPC is leading the Community Power Coalition, which is scaling and replicating impactful solar models that deliver economic benefits. And we're training a cadre of solar developers across the country under a Solar for All award from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. IPC opened our process for receiving intake and applications for construction to permanent community solar project financing in April of this year. And projects are beginning to move through that process, but there's no time like the present. So we thought now would be a good time to share more information about our Solar for All construction to permanent loans. Before we jump in, let me just say a few things. First, we've done a number of webinars before this one announcing our Solar for All financing products, sharing more information about compliance with Davis-Bacon. You can find recordings of those webinars on our Solar for All program page. You can also find a full program guidance document that details information about our program, about our financing products at that web page. I also want to let you know a few things at the top. First, this webinar is being recorded. We will share a recording and the slide deck from it in a follow-up email. We'll also post it to our Solar for All resources page. IPC does not, we have as a policy, we don't allow AI note takers or bots, so they're going to be excused from the meeting. And I want to let you know that you and all other attendees are in listen only mode, but we are collecting questions and we'll set aside time at the end to answer as many of them as we can. We encourage you to type your questions into the Q&A console on your screen at the bottom of your screen. And we encourage you to type your questions in early and often so we can, that'll increase your chances that we'll be able to get to your questions and they'll be answered live. But we will follow up with more Q&A. We have an FAQ, a frequently asked questions page on our Solar for All website, and we will follow up any questions that we aren't able to answer on that page. Let's see. Let me go to the next slide here. Yeah, before we jump in, I also want to share a couple of disclaimers with you that this information should not be construed as legal advice or a substitute for conducting your own eligibility and compliance analysis. Solar for All applicants are responsible for doing that analysis on your own. I also want to let you know that this program is ever evolving, and should guidance change, we will follow up with future guidance and do our best to keep you apprised. Finally, while the Solar for All program is supported by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the content doesn't necessarily reflect their views or the policies of the EPA. Okay, with that out of the way, I will, before turning it over to John D'Agostino from our shop, let me just tell you what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to give you a product overview of our construction to permanent loan product and eligibility. We'll talk through intake and application process, and we'll go through our application evaluation criteria. And then, as I mentioned before, we will have some time for Q&A. So that's the plan. Let me now turn it over to John D'Agostino, IPC's Managing Director of Clean Energy Transactions. John, take it away.
Thanks, Nate. So yes, thank you everyone for joining. It's been a wild few months as IPC has rolled out its Solar for All initial finance offerings. So as Nate mentioned, I'm John D'Agostino. I lead the transaction team at IPC, where we are handling intake of prospective requests for financing assistance for Solar for All qualified projects, diligence, management, transaction packaging, eventual approval, so kind of structuring and what have you. So what I'm going to go into today, as Nate referenced, is our construction to permanent loan offering, which is one of two loan programs that we launched looking back several months ago. I think it'd be late April. I think we did the original webinar back in March. So if you can go to the next slide. For those of you who have joined us in prior presentations, you've seen the slide before. So this is really the this suite of offerings that IPC is intending to launch over the course of our Solar for All financing assistance. And this is in line with our work plans. And so to date, our two offerings, the interconnection bridge loan program, which you see at about, what was that, 8 o'clock, and then the construction to perm down at 6 o'clock, is the two offerings that have launched. We are working through the ITC transfer guarantee, hoping to have that online by mid-2025, our own PPA and lease offering, and then pre-development lending. And this is all for the universe of low to moderate income serving community solar. And then eventually you see grayed out are the suite of our multifamily offerings, which are still in development, and we're hoping to launch towards the tail end of 2025. So as the Zoom just showed, today's focus is on the construction to perm / we call it construction to perm or perm, because for folks who have projects and they have construction financing secured, you can apply just for the permanent financing, or you can apply for the full gamut of construction to perm, kind of a one-stop shop. So go ahead to the next slide. So high level overview of the product for those of you who are in the solar development space. This isn't particularly novel for macro purposes, but the intent here is to support the construction, operation, management, and ITC monetization costs for solar for all eligible distributed generation community solar PV systems. This does include storage. It doesn't standalone storage is not qualified, but if you're doing a solar plus storage project, then the storage system could also qualify. The facility amount here will do loans for individual projects, or for batching projects as small as $500,000 up to a cap of $15 million. You see here for the facility, for the advance rate, we'll do up to 100% of construction financing, depending on if you're entering into a tax equity partnership. This may be, some percentage of the turnkey development costs of the project. If you're doing ITC monetization or elective pay, we include a bridge loan feature for the ITC monetization, if that's, of interest for folks. So at the end of the day, what we're looking at for the permanent piece of the financing here, you see, is up to 70% of the turnkey project development costs, plus this ITC transfer or elective pay bridge feature. That can also be sized up to 70% of the total project cost. For instance, if you have your baseline 30% ITC level plus various adders, domestic content, and cited on multifamily, low to moderate income, multifamily property, et cetera. So the total cost between the bridge and the perm is, of course, 100%. We're not going to offer more financing than the project cost. But really, this is meant to provide flexibility for the project development, where some folks have a representative 70% ITC down to a 30%, and you just complement that with the debt. And again, this is all based on underwriting, based on cash flows, based on project models. And so, we're really here to kind of take a look and then try to provide as much flexibility from a lending basis as is helpful for the project. Interest rate is listed here. Construction financing we're using up tos. We have discretion, around these numbers, but we're really trying to go out to the market with a compelling offer that we think will help a lot of projects across the country pencil and catalyze investment in projects and geographies that, financing can make projects challenging to pencil. So the construction interest here is 3.24%, listed as up to 3.24%. The permanent financing is up to 2.99%. The term for each of these, for construction, we're kind of going out to market with a construction period of up to 24 months. The perm is up to 25 years, and then the bridge feature on the perm for the ITC monetization purposes here you see listed as up to 24 months. And, as most folks are aware, when you're going through an ITC transfer transaction or elective pay, a lot of those ITCs get monetized within 12 months or so. But depending on the timing, we want to provide as much flexibility as possible to bridge that period to kind of help developers with cash flow. Let's go to the next slide. So eligibility criteria. This slide, I think, you've seen in prior webinars. There's really not a lot of material change here. The gating criterion for solar for all is that the projects themselves have to be low to moderate income serving, right? Like serving the low income and disadvantaged communities. From a sizing perspective, there's a cap at 5 megawatts AC, um, minimum of 20% savings to offset households' electric bills. Located in one of the program jurisdictions, and we'll see on a subsequent slide, IPC's program is operating in 46 states plus Puerto Rico plus the District of Columbia. So you'll see that map. You can kind of understand whether your project is located in one of those locations. And then there are criteria around the construction of these projects. All projects have to conform with Davis-Bacon and related acts. And then Build America, Buy America provisions for equipment purchasing for the project. So we'll get into process later, but just kind of as a preview, from an intake form perspective, in order to proceed past our intake form stage, developers, submitters need to be able to check these boxes. They need to say, yes, my project is going to provide these 20% savings. It's going to conform to Davis-Bacon requirements. It's going to conform to Build America, Buy America. And really, that's the gating criterion to be able to move kind of deeper into the process, into the formal project application evaluation process. In terms of the electricity that's generated here, because again, we're focusing on community solar projects, at least 50% of the electricity generated from the system and at least 50% of the benefits has to flow to multiple residential customers within the same utility territory as the facility. So you can't have remotely located projects, or you can have complementarity on the other 50% of the generation, but at a minimum, 50% of that generation has to be at a 20% discount to existing electric bills. So we have our program guidance posted here, and we have the IPC landing page for all things solar for all. Strongly encourage you to review our program guidance, to review the hyperlinked here for the EPA's FAQs on solar for all writ large. And then if there's anything that's kind of missing there, feel free to reach out with questions. We're happy to clarify and then update our program guidance and FAQs that we're posting to our website. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned here, IPC's program is operating in 46 states plus DC plus Puerto Rico. So, lots of flexibility. We're not operating in tribal geographies. However, we have kind of a wide berth. And, for those of you who are out there in the market, you're familiar, there are more economically supportive environments, if you will, for low to moderate income community solar development. Some states have threshold mandates, some have programs that are kind of just getting started, and some of them don't necessarily have catalytic policy environments. And so the purpose of our program is to try to catalyze investment across all of these jurisdictions. And so in doing so, we're really looking to try to spread financial assistance in lots of geographies and in stand up new developers, as Nate referred to earlier, and catalyze this market from a financing perspective. So there's also linked here, there are other Solar for All awardees, where there are state energy offices and the like, and then other coalitions that have received Solar for All funds. And so we can only kind of speak to our program offering, but at the end of the day, the purpose of these funds is really to catalyze that low to moderate income market writ large, but specifically here for community solar. Go ahead. So I mentioned this earlier, we can kind of go over very briefly. So IPC for our submissions for financing assistance, we have kind of a two-step process. So the intake form is the first step. It's a kind of a getting to know you as the submitter in your project. And so this is it's an intake form submitted by a developer. In general, it shouldn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes to fill out, and it's a little bit of who are you, what is the name of your project, what's the system size, where is it located, and a lot of the intake form is kind of self-attestation. It's the previously referred to. The project will comply with the Build America, Buy America, with Davis-Bacon. It's going to provide the 20% savings to the off-takers. So the purpose there is to have a very light touch vetting filtering process. So we know, yes, the intent is to conform with all of these requirements. There's no material deviations. It's also attestation. I have site control, right? I have already obtained clear title for a project. You're not asked to provide any of that documentation at this stage. It's largely self-attestation. But those projects that all those boxes get checked, you will receive a response, and that'll be, this is stage 4, invited to submit a full financing application. Projects that don't conform with all of those requirements will be notified that they're unable to proceed in this manner. And then we have an appeals process. If at some point like you don't have clear title, or you're able to come back around and procure it, or you're able to change your project, and then say, okay, I can offer 20% savings on electric bills, right? Like we would come back through a revised intake form for that project. As always, like hyperlink to your program guidance, this entire process is kind of fleshed out in detail what you're going to be asked for. I think we have an indicative intake form posted on our Solar for All page that's helpful for folks to review prior to actually going to submit that form. So the next slide. So anyway, I already kind of touched on this. It's we're asking you to fill out an intake form for each financing product and each project. So if some folks are developing multiple projects in the same jurisdiction, multiple jurisdictions, it's helpful for us to be able to break it down in kind of granular pieces and review each project on a standalone basis. And so again, on the intake form side, it shouldn't be a lot of documentation. I know for some folks who have multiple projects, the intake form, when they get to the application, you're kind of taking the same pro forma, let's say, and uploading it for each of the 4 or 5 projects that folks are submitting. And that's fine if all the projects flow through a single pro forma. So I've already touched it here, and on the right-hand side, you'll see, so one of the things, because we have a 46 state plus DC plus Puerto Rico work plan, is we're trying to make sure that we're managing project flow as they're moving forward, and kind of saying, hey, we don't want a full concentration of like 100% of our intake or our eventual applications in some state, whatever it may be, right? So part of this is just to kind of like manage on the back end, okay, like where are we seeing a lot of intake, how are we moving it through the process, because we have a responsibility under our work plan to the EPA to not heavily concentrate in a single jurisdiction. The goal is to catalyze various markets across the country, and eventually across financing products and developers as well. So concentration is always in the back of our mind. You see here, there's also language, and you'll receive this if you receive a invitation to submit an application. You'll have 90 calendar days to complete the application, which again, this is the financing application, which we'll get to in a second, is where the kind of the bulk of the, okay, show us the documents that you have, show us evidence of the site control, show us evidence of clear title, if you have a pro forma for the project, etc. It's kind of putting everything on our plate for us to work through. So that can take some time, as folks are familiar. Title searches can take time. So usually, we'll try to provide a note from the intake form saying, if you don't have evidence of clear title yet, that will be a requirement for a application to be considered complete. Go to the next slide. So the application process, as I mentioned, invited applicants can submit a full financing application. They'll have 90 days to do so. And this is really where we get into, it's not exhaustive diligence, but it's yes, they have what they claim they have. It's for us to digest an understanding of the project. If we're reviewing site leases, it's just good to be aware ahead of time of like, are there material deviations from kind of a model site lease that we would normally see? How are you viewing the economics of the project, cash flows, projections of construction, and the like? And that's just helpful for us on the back end to kind of understand like how projects are tracking, and then what our internal barometer is for how quickly we might be able to move, subject to being able to issue a letter of interest on the project. So the purpose here, you see this in stage 3, projects that we accept and we want to provide an indication that we would like to proceed with within the process to eventually offer financing assistance. will receive a letter of intent, and that letter of intent will spell out the goal of executing a fully binding term sheet within, I think, a several month period. We're trying to give ourselves latitude to work through that process. Recognizing also that while IPC may be the primary lender, there may be other lenders that we are, participating into a transaction. So that process can take time and kind of negotiation. So accepted applications will receive that letter of intent. Um, Subject to that letter of intent, we'll engage with the applicant for kind of formal discussions around the project, and the application materials that were submitted will kind of offer feedback and ask questions and have a two-way conversation. And the goal there is to move toward stage 4, which is the negotiation and execution of a binding term sheet. And that binding term sheet will be the basis for IPC enterprise investment committee approval or board approval, depending on the sizing of the loan request. And so that internal approval from our investment committee or board will then allow us to enter into, formal loan documentation. I'll just say, subject to the agreed upon, term sheet, we'll have, we'll be providing feedback, right? Line of sight as to like, okay, here's what this means. Here are the implications. So while there's a timing differential between term sheet execution and loan document execution, where we have to go through our internal approval process, that should provide applicants with sufficient time to make sure you're getting anything that you need to get on your end, whether it's contracting with independent engineers or procuring data acquisition systems that we'll approve and that sort of thing. So all of that we'll talk through when we get to the engagement process after the letter of intent is issued. And so really the goal here is to manage project financing applications, as mentioned previously, managing projects in a steady state manner where we're committing funds in over the course of our geographic work plan area, and helping folks move projects along. Really the goal here is for these the funds to be catalytic where projects have been stalled either due to capital markets or kind of general project development issues. Go ahead. So this kind of breaks down the pieces of the financing application, and so it breaks down into project team experience. In the past, in the intake form, you've told me the name of your company and kind of who you are as the individual submitter. But here's where we're going to ask for, what is your team experience? And that can be at your present organization, at your prior organization, resumes, certifications, and the like. Project specifications. Here is my executed site lease, right? Here is my pro forma for the project. Here's my proposed EPC agreement for the project. Here's my proposed subscriber manager. Financing structure, are we entering into a tax equity partnership or similar partnership structure? Are we availing ourselves of transfer or elective pay? Impact and outcomes, like there's co-benefits to a lot of these projects. And so whether it's workforce development or local economic development or agrivoltaics or deeper energy savings, right, beyond the 20% savings that are required by the program. We want you to flesh these out so we have a holistic view of both the project's intent and co-benefits, as well as the institutional kind of mission orientation of the developer's portfolio of prospective projects. And then we'll ask for, compliance, experience complying with DBRA and BABA, and general kind of asset management. A question we have is have you owned projects before, right? Like owning projects is different than developing to sell. And so we want to make sure we're providing technical assistance to help folks understand kind of best practices and what's necessary in order to stand up ownership, whether it's a single project or a portfolio of projects, again, depending on if they're a single geography or multiple geographies. So the goal is to support developers through this process by providing line of sight for compliance-based obligations for the life of these projects. So I already mentioned on the right here, approved financing applications will receive a letter of interest and a term sheet. but basically our model term sheet, and then we'll work towards negotiating, and executing a binding form of that term sheet for IPC investment approval. Finance applications may be deferred or denied depending on, again, I mentioned earlier, concentration. If we receive 100% of our applications from a specific state or geography, the goal would be to try to look for applications outside of that jurisdiction to kind of make sure we're spreading money around catalytically. And it's not to say that, over a period of time that we can't come back to those applications, because we're entering into year 2 of our work plan. So we want to make sure that we're catalyzing. We're not kind of spending all the money at once. We want to give folks time to get organized, to be able to submit applications. And so we're managing the pipeline that has come in to date. But if folks have not submitted yet and are interested in submitting, we encourage you to complete the intake form so you can kind of get an indicative yes to proceed, or no, this isn't conforming, to get to that financing application stage. And so we have line of sight on the project, so we can kind of be thoughtful about how we're responding to folks and how we're managing folks through this process. All right, the next slide. Evaluation criteria. So Nate, I'm going to hand this back over to you, and I'll be around for questions clearly towards the end.
Great. Thanks so much, John. Very helpful. Yeah, so as John mentioned, fundamentally, our program is about catalyzing investment. And so, as we, so this is where phase, John mentioned this is a 2-step process. The second step of that is the application process. And this is the criteria which we use to evaluate those applications. So it tracks pretty closely to some of the key things that are in the application that are requested that John spoke to. Investment term alignment, you can see the relative weighting, 20%. This is track record of financing projects and working in low-income communities. So this is obviously, what we're trying to catalyze here, and our work. But zooming back out, we're also looking at broader sort of project team and experience in this space. We're also, John mentioned some of the compliance pieces, and actually the next slide too, we'll dig into those pieces, but we're looking for a demonstration of capacity and readiness to meet those requirements. And then broadly, we're looking for impact. And you can see a note that we have discretion for flexible financing terms for projects that demonstrate deeper impact. But looking at strategic alignment, project impact, and equitable and meaningful benefits, our assessment of that is weighted as well. And collectively, of course, we'll evaluate those, and that adds up to 100%. Yeah, so I mentioned some of the compliance pieces. Because this is a federal funding award, it comes with a bunch of strings, including 2 CFR regs. Project applicants have to register with sam.gov for UEI. You have to attest to not disbarred or suspended from federal contracting. Davis-Bacon and BABA compliance and reporting and certification. We had a prior webinar on Davis-Bacon. We will be doing one on Build America, Buy America as well. So more to come on that. Archaeological and Historic Preservation Act, National Historic Preservation, floodplain management. And then we also have a whole bunch of reporting requirements for EPA. And so the projects that are coming through our pipeline in turn have to report on those. So those include financial, project performance, and subscriber management reporting. And part of our assessment, of course, has to do with ensuring that consumers, subscribers to Community Solar Project are adequately protected. And so there's requirements along those lines, all of which is again in that program guidance document. And then we have long-term asset management, O&M, that we're looking at too. So I mentioned we have a lot of resources, some links to some of these resources. Again, we will make the deck available for download on our Solar for All webpage, and you can also find these resources there as well. But these links you'll see as part of the deck, and we'll have a link to the recording. We've already got some questions in the Q&A related to that, so just wanted to emphasize that. And with that, let's pull up for some Q&A. Let me see what's come in so far. Okay, first question. I would like to confirm I understand that any and all of the IPC Solar for All funding programs that IPC needs take a first position on real estate for collateral. For project site that already have a real estate mortgage in place, such as an FNMA loan, it will be impossible to get that loan servicer to agree to subordinating their loan to an IPC loan. John, you want to take that one?
Well, yeah. So this product it's not a real estate loan. This is to a project company. So we are providing financing to a third party owned asset that is installed at a given location. And so we are not looking for collateral in the underlying real estate, because there's a site lease between our borrower and the site owner. And so for our purposes, the collateral requirements is the project assets. And so what we do require, however, is an SNDA between the existing mortgage holder, acknowledging that the solar assets exist on the site, such that if there is a foreclosure proceeding, the solar assets are not caught up in that foreclosure proceeding. So that is a requirement. But no, we're not taking real estate collateral in the property itself, such that we would need subordination from direct collateral on the property.
Thanks for that. Another question, is the 15 million the cap on construction or perm? Can you go higher for construction? Also, is that per developer or per project? Can a developer seek more than 15 million for multiple projects?
So it's on a per project basis. The cap is both for construction and for perm. So that's in our work plan. We do not have latitude to work outside of our EPA approved work plan. So the $15 million cap is for the construction side and the permanent side. So there's nothing to stop folks if there's a gap in construction financing. If you need 16 million for construction, but we're only able to offer 15, right? Like, feel free to avail yourself of other resources. I will say, and just kind of from a general sizing perspective, we have a 5 megawatt AC cap on project sizes, but we have an obligation under our work plan to manage and work throughout the country. And so bringing a portfolio of, let's say, like 10 5 megawatt AC projects will be harder for us to support, providing financing for all of those projects than, say, if you brought one, or if you brought a 1 megawatt project, just from a general, pool of funds distribution perspective. But if there is a project that we're moving forward on and $15 million is insufficient, there's not necessarily anything we can work with. Either you have other lenders or equity contributions to make the construction financing work out for your project.
Great, thanks. A question about how benefits are shared if utilities are all owner paid. I'll take the first crack at that, and then John, if you have anything to fill in, please do so. First, I think this is going to come up more in the multifamily context, and so we have not released those products yet. We intend to, this calendar year, later in the calendar year. Second, I will say we have a household savings methodology that is published on our Solar for All page, so you can see that for more color. But broadly, and that does detail master metered versus individually metered scenarios in the multifamily context. But broadly, there is we want to ensure that the savings, the 20% minimum savings, is real and meaningful. But there are certain non-utility benefits that can go towards that household savings minimum requirement. So anything to add there, John?
I think that's correct. This we're talking about community solar. So at the end of the day, top line revenues are generated by subscribers to that community solar project. So they're not necessarily on site, but the subscribers, I mean, we mentioned this at the beginning, are households, right? So at least 50% of the offtake has to be to households. So it has to be folks that are in a position to pay their own utilities, right? In order to contract with the subscriber manager to be a revenue contributor to the project.
Great. Next question, can you please define project team and experience, given that this is a new program? Yeah, I will just say on this, we're not looking necessarily when we're talking about experience, we're talking about experience potentially beyond the confines of the Solar for All program. So we're looking for, broadly, industry experience and market experience in broader terms for this particular evaluation criteria. Anything to add there, John?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are asking to learn who, if you are submitting a project, who is your team, right? Is it you, or is it 10 or 20 people? Have you been doing this for a year or 20 years? And this isn't to necessarily say that just because you are a new organization and you don't have like a really extensive track record that you're not going to be qualified to move forward. Again, the purpose of the Solar for All program is to catalyze investment in this market. And so we understand that folks may not have been in business in your current organization for an extended period of time, or members of your team may be new to the industry. We're just trying to find out, who are you? Have you done solar before? That's helpful for us to know as we kind of decide how we're going to manage project flow.
Great. Yeah, next question is how are we thinking about planning for potential changes to the ITC? And maybe I'll just combine this. There's a couple of like broader sort of policy questions about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and sort of the policy environment. And I'll just start by saying, these funds are obligated. We are contractually obligated to carry out our program with the Environmental Protection Agency. We have ongoing engagement with our program officer. That is not to say we are not tracking. Of course, we're tracking the policy environment and changes in the policy environment. But we are under contract with the EPA to perform, and so we are moving forward. John, anything on that from you?
No, I think we're responsive to the policy environment as it exists. And so so long as the current policy environment for the 2025 tax year is in effect, we'll proceed accordingly. And if there are changes, we will, move with those changes.
Great. Does financing include vertical and horizontal development? I'm going to let you take that one.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% certain what's meant by vertical and horizontal development. What I can say, what I think it may be asking this question is, I'm thinking of the vertical development as single project proceeding through pre-development, development, construction, perm, and so that's very much something that's supported here. Is we're making sure there's a project for this financing product. That you have site control, you have the ability to do the things that are necessary in order to construct the project. And so that kind of all starts with site control for the project. Horizontal development, I think of more as, construction across multiple projects, or maybe it's like origination or development. And so if it's early enough in the life cycle, the goal here, this is not a financing product for, say, origination purposes, right? For general development OpEx. We are looking at financing products. I mentioned on our first slide, we have other financing products that we're planning to roll out later this year, whether it's direct pre-development loans to LMI community solar developers or development lines of credit and the like. But that's not this product. And so for our purposes here, the purpose is that you have a project, you have site control, you are going to construct the project, or it's already under construction you have construction financing lined up and you just need the perm takeout.
Great. Next question, when will you all provide an RFP for EPC companies that do installation? Go ahead.
Well, I'll just offer, so we're lending to third-party owned project developers. And so we, at this point, some of the expectation is like whomever is going to construct the project is going to evaluate and run their own process to get an EPC, right? Like we want to be thoughtful about um, not running an RFP for someone else because there may be ways in which the project developer wants to vet, review. I will say, we will review the EPC that's selected and just kind of confirm capacity, experience. If you're proposing a 2 megawatt project, have they done a 2 megawatt project before? Have they done a 1 megawatt project before? Right. Like, and that's, as a lender, that's just kind of like best practice of making sure that we can have confidence that if we're offering construction financing, that the construction process will be seen through to operation. So we don't currently kind of have a plan for RP for our purposes. I think down the road, perhaps when we're launching our PPA release, that might be something that we have an open request for qualifications. Yeah, but at this point for this product, we do not.
That's right. Yeah. And I will just also say, if you're interested in the solicitations that we do have for services under this program, we have a solicitations page and we have a couple of open procurements. But what John said is spot on. Okay, next question. Do you anticipate that the terms for multifamily loans would be similar to the currently available loan terms?
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
So we can't speak to other, loan products that we haven't rolled out yet. We'll be able to speak to those terms when they kind of come to market. So, for the time being, the two lending products that are out the door, that's kind of what we have. So, I never want to tell people to hold your breath, but we're going to have a process internally to develop to fully bake those products and make sure that when they go out to market, the idea is for them to be similarly catalytic. And so remains to be seen, but we'll have to wait until those products come out to the market.
Yeah, and I'll also add that, I mentioned at the outset that we are part of the Community Power Coalition. So we are a coalition. IPC is leading that coalition, and we are a lender. But there are other lenders in the coalition, and they will be coming out with products as well. Again, don't want to weigh in on what the terms of those products will be, but more information will be coming when our other lenders as part of our coalition have products that are ready for release too. Next question, can pre-dev takeout be part of construction financing?
Yeah, so there's a recognition that there are costs that are incurred in the pre-development of a project, and so the construction financing at the day is compensating for the construction cost, and some of that is the soft cost work of obtaining a site lease, right, and getting contingent interconnection. So some of this boils down to how you're verifying and quantifying those costs. But it's not an ineligible expense. So, yes, but it kind of depends on the details of what is being presented as a pre-development, cost.
Very good. Could you share how IPC evaluates construction and permanent financing for emerging developers with limited balance sheets who are actively building a track record in community solar and LMI focused projects? Excuse me. Good question. John, do you want to take a first crack, or
Yeah,
you want me? Yeah.
it's I'll kind of continue to harp on this, that the purpose of our work plan is to catalyze investment in this market. There's a recognition that this is a very hard market, smaller system sizes, LMI offtake, emerging policy environments, solar for all program kind of exists with purpose, right? And so we don't necessarily anticipate that folks that are submitting projects are going to have, tens of $1 million of equity or cash on their balance sheets, right? The goal is project development. It's catalyzing project development. And so we don't have kind of a hard and fast rule or guidance internally of, you know, if you have this cash position or this balance sheet, yes. And if you don't know, again, some of this boils down to risk tolerance and how our capacity to mitigate those risks and help you mitigating the risks on the project development side. But the goal is to help catalyze investment. So if you are a developer that does not have a particularly large balance sheet, or it's a you're tracking and growing the balance sheet, or your general financial statements, your financial strength, we'll see that, right? And like that'll be part of the discussion as an understanding of, okay, here's where you are, and maybe that you've done this before with large organizations, and this is kind of your second act, or it could be that you've never done this before, right? And so that's part of the discussion. It's not a kind of a hard fork in the road. It's just a consideration for us as we evaluate applications.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll just emphasize too, part of our part of our charge here is explicitly to build capacity and train solar developers to work in these markets. That's part of the focus of our program, and so that's what we're doing. And sort of in addition to the financing piece, there's a technical assistance piece, and we're working with some of the members of our Community Power Coalition, including the University of New Hampshire Center for Impact Finance, that has some curriculum available that's going to be building out a resource hub to help build capacity for emerging solar developers to work in these markets. So there is a TA piece that we didn't speak to so much on today's webinar, but that's also part of our program. Okay, next question. Is there a general time frame for review of full application submissions and when developers can expect to hear back? John?
Yeah, there's not, and in part, when we were moving to launch the program, there was a recognition that um, we didn't know how many applications we were going to get in the door, right? And so since we've launched in late April, we've received intake forms, and some of those intake forms, folks have received an invitation to apply, and some folks have applied. And we continue to receive intake forms and continue to invite folks to apply. And so, a lot of this is process based, and it's a question of when we receive those materials, like what do we see, right? And then they have to work their way through our internal vetting process. We have to kind of distill them down and compile them, making sure that members of our evaluation team review all the primary source documents, and there's internal discussions. And so clearly, we're 2 months old, and so we are managing that workload and that workflow. So we fully appreciate and recognize, it's June. There's a calendar year, for tax purposes. But we're not kind of wedding ourselves to it. We have to provide a letter of intent within 20 days because logistically we're continuing to build out the program internally, line of sight for forthcoming products and standing those up. And so it's not building the airplane while flying it, but it is making sure all your turn signals are working. So the goal is to try to, as folks have submitted, we're trying to make sure that folks that have submitted, they are getting response and kind of making sure we have all of the full application materials and an understanding of what has been submitted. So receiving communications, and the goal is to get them to here's a letter of interest, or, we're choosing not to proceed at the present time, response as quickly as possible.
Great. And we're coming to the end of questions. So if you have other questions that you want to ask, please make sure to submit those, and so we can cover those. But a question that I'm so glad got asked is it too late for a company or developer to apply to this program? And I'm just going to say emphatically no, but go ahead, John.
No. The solicitation's open. Again, if you go to, there's links in this presentation, but the Inclusive Prosperity Capital webpage, we have a Solar for All landing area. There's a hyperlink there to submit an intake form. Again, this specific product offering is for projects, right? And so the expectation is that if you're completing an intake form, I always encourage folks to read through the program guidance first, read through the EPA's Solar for All program page first, and then make sure you have a full kind of understanding of all of the requirements and obligations. But if you have a project that's developed with these funds in mind and this purpose, and the construction of perm loan or perm financing can be catalytic for your project, we encourage you to fill out the intake form, because we're excited to see all of the project development that's occurring throughout the country, and see how we can be supportive in catalyzing those projects to fruition.
Great. And a related question, is there a soft or hard deadline to submit for consideration?
We don't have line of sight for that. I'd say it's always helpful to I mentioned earlier there's kind of a 90-day time frame from receiving an indication of an invitation to proceed to full application once you've submitted that intake form and received a response. So um, you know, I encourage folks to submit intake forms when you feel like you're ready or tracking to be ready to complete an application. So at a minimum, our expectation is that if you are submitting for project financing, you have some form of site control, whether it's a site lease or at least an option to lease, because we have to be thoughtful just about our internal resources. We want to make sure we're working on projects that are real or have a reasonable likelihood of being real. But it helps us be aware of your project. You exist, your project exists, right? And like, here's kind of what I have and what I don't have. And that helps us say, okay, here's how we're going to allocate internal resources and time to kind of shepherding that project along.
Great. Next question, how are we coordinating with other Solar for All programs? Maybe I'll take that one. And will there be standardized similar products? So I'll start at least, and again, John, please feel free to weigh in. We are coordinating in a variety of venues and closely in close communication with other Solar for All awardees, state awardees, other nonprofit awardees. There are 60 awardees in the program. There are various working groups. We're on regular calls and also email contact and otherwise with other Solar for All awardees to ensure complementarity and to make sure certainly don't want to double count, but we do want to amplify our impact with them. And we are also coordinating on various programmatic pieces too. In terms of standardization and similar products, all of it sort of fits under the rubric and under EPA's terms and conditions and programs terms. But other Solar for All programs are focused on other markets. There are residential rooftop solar programs that are focused on those markets. There are other products associated. Some are more grant focused. So there is not broad standardization, although it all sort of fits under trying to catalyze markets and low income solar projects. John, anything to add?
For our purposes, our primary focus is on rolling out the financing support, the financial assistance that's memorialized in our work plan. And so we can't speak what's in other folks' work plans. And so some folks took a year, to plan what they're going to be coming to the market with. We kind of had a plan, and so we're out here kind of doing our thing. But to Nate's point, yes, we want to make sure we're not overlapping with other folks' purported implementation of their work plan. So we want to be thoughtful. Again, this is part of the process of getting to know you, is who are you, who you've been in touch with, right? Like, kind of how should we be spending our time, knowing how you're spending your time.
Great. Another question about, can you put a link to the application in the chat, please? A couple important pieces on this. First, as John mentioned, really we've bifurcated this into a two-step process. So the first step is an intake submission. There is a link to the intake form, and that is on our Solar for All page, and we can make sure that's widely available and disseminated. The application is an invitation if you meet basic program eligibility after that. So you will receive a link after that. But for the application phase, we're not providing a link to that unless you you go through the intake process first. Anything to add there?
I think that sounds right.
Great. I don't see any other questions at this time, and we're getting close to the top of the hour. So if you do have any other questions, type them in now. I want to thank you, John, for your presentation and for sharing your insights. I also want to just thank our audience. Thanks for the good questions and thanks for your engagement in this program. That certainly helps our program as a whole, and we appreciate it. I also want to let you know that this is part of a summer webinar series. So I think I mentioned that we will be doing a BABA, a Build America, Buy America focused webinar for solar developers, a deep dive later this summer, and we do have lots of other resources. We'll continue to share those as they are released. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day. Oh, see lots of thanks coming in too. Intake form link that is available on our Solar for All page, but we will make sure there's a link to it in the FAQ questions as well. So thanks.